Hello, this is Zian Cyrus. I'm the founder of the International Korean Martial Arts Federation and of the Yushin Hapkido system, which is a derivative of Hapkido and other systems. What I want to talk about today is what I would call signature skills and with respect to Hapkido. So I've prepared a narrative here so that I don't meander all over the place and what have you. So I'm going to read what I've written here with some points of elaboration and to get the point across. Now, most martial arts systems have key signature theories, concepts, methodologies, strategies, and skills that are unique to it. Since Hapkido is a derivative of Daitoryu Aikijutsu, some of the key signatures or signature skills should be evident in the practice of Hapkido. For the most part, the technical content of Hapkido is not unique as it shares skills that are common to many martial arts systems, in particular forms of Jiu-Jitsu. It must be kept in mind that whenever a tradition finds its way into another culture, appropriation occurs. That is what's also known as cultural appropriation. That is, it is transformed by the customs, the mores, the traditions of that culture. An example of this, for instance, would be Buddhism. When Buddhism left Nepal or India and found its way into China, it became what's known as Chan Buddhism. What a lot of people, which eventually became Zen when it found its way into Japan. But what a lot of people don't realize is that when Buddhism found its way into China, it merged with Taoism. So there's a lot of Taoist concept now in Buddhism, particularly in Korea. It's the Sun tradition. In Japan, it's Zen. In Vietnam, it's Tien. All of that. But and you'll hear me say this again, but the underlying tradition remains the same, okay? So basically, when there is a claim that a practice is derived from another and there is little or no resemblance to the root tradition, this is an indication that such claim, one, may be unsubstantiated, and two, not clearly understood. Now, key signature skills can serve as somewhat of a history book with respect to when and who introduced it. That is, in particular here to focus on one small practice in Hapkido, Danjun Ho Hap, which essentially translates to red field, which is the Danjun or the Dantien or the Tanden or the Hara, red field breath method. Based on my research, I have found that there is a similar practice in Daitoryu. It is known as Kokyu Tanden Ho. Same thing, okay? This practice is based, at least in the Daitoryu tradition, this practice is based on the sword and is key in the execution of the most basic to the most advanced skill. Now, Danjun Hohabap, also known as by most Hapkido practitioners as Danjun breathing. And that's exactly what it is. So, it is supposed to be an integral part of Hapkido practice. It appears to only be a ritual performed at the beginning and at the end of each class that, literally has no bearing it has no bearing on its actual practice, and very little is actually known about it except for breathing into the lower abdomen on the in breath and on the out breath. Now, while doing this Danjun breathing, you spread your fingers and it moves in a curved path, just about the shoulder or eye level. And it's retracted, on the out breath, okay? Now, again, based on my research and reverse engineering, it is my opinion that the action of breathing into and expanding the lower abdomen while spreading the fingers and extending the arms upward in a curved path is actually, however misinterpreted, is the action of bringing a sword from the middle posture to high posture and allowing it to fall in a basic downward cut. If this is done correctly, you should be able to raise the sword, okay? You should be able to raise the sword to high posture, which is in the Japanese traditions, it's Jodan, okay? To high posture, even if someone is seizing your wrist trying to restrain your cut or your ability to deploy the sword. These two actions are known as aikiage, in Korean, hapki-wi, and aikisage, in Korean, it's hapki-wi. Both of these actions are meant to stabilize your center of gravity while strongly breaking your opponent's balance into an immobilization or throw, or even to strike. A common mistake made by Hapkido-in or Hapkido practitioners is to focus the breath on the anterior aspect of the lower abdomen or danjun when it should encompass the entire circumference of the body. Now imagine filling the body from the bottom up like blowing into a balloon. The front aspect of the balloon, which doesn't exist really, is not the only thing that moves. If you fill a balloon from the bottom up, the entire circumference of the balloon fills from the bottom up all the way up, right? So then there's this relationship between the first dantian or danjun and the third one, okay? So yes, there are three danjuns or dantian, that there are two others actually that gets ignored, right? So that's a very common mistake. All right? So maintaining the state with your strong focus on the danjun and lower abdomen while wielding a sword, most practitioners of Kenjutsu or Iaido or Kendo, this presents a tremendous training challenge that allows you to advance in a very significant way. Now, while proper breath control is an important aspect of Danjun Hohabap, it is my opinion that this is somewhat of a misnomer. It should be accurately described or referred to as Hapkido, much like Qigong, okay? Hapkido meaning energy joining or energy coordinating methods or methods. Now, of which Hobap, breath control, is a part of. There are many concepts, principles, methodologies, strategies, and skills that are combines to realize Hapki. After all, the goal is to join with an opponent and literally break his or her balance and nullify his or her initiative. The action of bringing, just a moment here. The action of bringing the sword again to high position is not as easy as it looks. You know, grab a sword and hold it in middle position and have somebody grab your wrist and try to pick that sword up, and you'll come to appreciate how difficult it is. But again, you know, practice. The action of breathing has important health benefits aside from its martial arts applications. It massages your internal organs, which perfuses them with blood, oxygen, nutrient delivery, lymphatic function, etc. The scalenes, which is a group of muscles just posterior of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, this muscle that you can pinch here, okay? These muscles, the scalenes, which is a cervical muscle, originates on the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae and inserts on the first and second rib. When you take a breath, the scalenes contract to elevate the first and second rib to allow for an upward expansion of the lung. Due to chest breathing and prolonged stress, this shortens the muscles. In other words, it makes it tight, right? Or taut. This shortens the muscles, all right? Due to overload and often produce, severe neck pain. So again, this kind of breathing causes the muscles to shorten. It pulls at its other attachment, which is the first and second rib, and of course the cervical vertebrae, and it can produce neck pain mostly due to what's known as a neuropathic pain, because that puts a traction effect on the nerves, and then there's pain. It's not always when you have neck pain that it's because of degenerative changes in the cervical region or some form of listhesis or something like that. It's not always that. Okay, so the treatment program, at least the way I do it in my acupuncture and oriental medicine clinic, is to instruct the patient to engage in what I call paradoxical or abdominal breathing, okay? So the treatment program, as I said, involves lower abdominal respiration for about 20 to 30 minutes a day. This removes the load on the scalene muscles, allowing them to rest and return to their resting length. This method can be used to also treat insomnia. Okay, so because it shifts your attention from your upper body to the lower body, and those of us who lay in bed all night and ruminate, and all this energy in the head, it tends to cause this energy to reduce. In other words, it pulls the energy from your head to the lower aspect of your body. Okay, so if you do the breathing, and then you focus on what's called the kidney 1 point, which is the first point on the kidney channel, also known as bubbling well, right at the bottom of the foot where the where the two rounded portions of your foot meets in the middle. That allows energy to descend. Okay, so as a practical matter, what you call dungeon breathing, if it's done properly, it can have that therapeutic effect. Now, the red field or dantian tanden is thought to be about 3 inches below your belly button and about 3 inches deep, located in the center of your pelvic girdle. So if the pelvic girdle, it's in the center. It's not in the front, it's the back. It's actually in the center. However, it's defined by anteriorly, which means in the front. It's defined by 3 major acupuncture points, which is CV4, and you can look up any book, all right, which is called Source Gate, CV5, Stone Gate, and CV6, which is the Sea of Chi, which is where everybody focus is actually. It's the sea of chi. Okay? Where this is where chi is absorbed from the environment, it's stored and distributed. And posteriorly, which is the back aspect of this orb that sits in the middle of your pelvic girdle, is defined by GV4, or in Chinese, Mingmen, meaning the life gate fire. So that's what animates you in the world that you're living in. Now, Daito Ryu, let me get back to where I was here. I need a teleprompter. Anyway, Daito Ryu, Aikijutsu, and its derivative have a similar practice, which is derived from effortlessly bringing a sword from lower middle to high posture and cutting downwards, with someone doing all they can to restrict your arm and hand movement. Completion of this cut requires breath control, awareness of the dantian or danjin or tanden, and complete relaxation and loss of tension, particularly from the shoulders. This is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, and requires a tremendous amount of years of practice. Further, this is reflected in the skill of Hapkiwi, which is Aikiage, and Hapkiare, Aikisage, which is upward and downward extension of energy, which translate into your opponent's loss of balance, which results in a throw or immobilization or a strike or thrust. The focus should not actually be on specific throws or immobilizations. Your opponent should not be aware that his or her balance is being broken or stolen. You should practice this against partners who are bigger and stronger than you and won't go along with you. You will not be successful at first, but diligent and mindful practice while maintaining a discerning mind will move you forward. Bear in mind that this kind of progress is slow and incremental. After years of diligent and mindful practice, you should be able to apply this principle no matter what part of your body is being attacked and no matter what the mode of attack happens to be. A key feature of this practice is to absorb and neutralize your opponent's power. Truly join with him or her. This is a major feature of Aiki or Hapki that is virtually not shared. And that's probably because the instructor doesn't simply know. But anyway, Hapki is not really a style, but a skill, principle, and concept, and a way of being which will transform your Hapkido practice. Most practitioners rarely ever get to this level. They are focused on whether this or that technique work. But what they don't realize is that by developing this skill, concept, and principle of Aiki, technique is created from that. You know, most of us study technique, of course that's okay, but when you get to that level, technique loses it's sort of like it's on the periphery somewhere, because no matter what happens, your response will be situation appropriate. Anyone, even the so-called untrained, can kick, punch, and choke you. So this perception that martial arts transcends this reality is an illusion. There has to be something more. So I hope that I've been able to shed some light on this whole concept of key signatures in the martial arts. I've studied two other martial arts where you know, there are definitely key signatures. So when you look at this art being performed, you can say, yeah, I know what that is. One of them is actually the Chen Tai Chi Chuan. You know, it's a very unique way of expressing Tai Chi, you know, and one of the unique things, the instant you see a Chen Tai Chi practitioner move, is the use of what's known as the Buddha's talpam. That's it. You see, it kind of looks like your hand is neither open nor closed. It's somewhere in between. And because the fingers are tiered, it's known as talpam. Now, as opposed to willow leaf palm, which is the Yang style of Tai Chi Chuan. So you see somebody doing Yang Tai Chi, they use what's known as the willow leaf palm, as opposed to the Chen style, the talpam. Now, both of these are Tai Chi, and one came from the other. So you can see, the problem there, okay? Now, this Buddha talpam didn't make its way into the Yang version of the Yang style. And there are several other nuances here that I can talk about, but I hope you get the point, right? So as Hapkido-in, we have to be able to identify what are the key signatures of Hapkido, and that defines it and distinguishes it from anything else out there. So feel free to critique, criticize, comment, add to what I've talked about today. Thank you very much. Namaste.